In this film, guys, we shall be taking a look at the 2005 horror movie, The Hostel. So without further ado, let's get into today's review. Let's get into it. So I thought then The Hostel was a solid movie with a lot of violence, a lot of gore, a lot of sex in there as well. I think it was the perfect horror movie that I don't think many horror movies would be able to replicate in terms of gore and in terms of violence and things like that. That had that in a nutshell in the best possible way I've seen. And I don't think that element of things can be replicated. The only closest thing to get to The Hostel would probably be the Saw franchise, but that is slightly different as he doesn't lure them, he captures them and puts them in cells. But that was different. And this felt fresh, it felt new, which is the best thing about this movie in my opinion. So I love how this movie starts out as more of a sex comedy sort of vibe, more like an American Pie, but more nudity and all that sort of jazz, in which to me was really good, as it made you think, I thought this was meant to be a horror movie, and all it's doing is setting up, explaining who the characters are, what they're sort of into, and what sort of makes them wanting to go backpacking. Why are they going backpacking? Most of this is just for girls, and obviously these girls, when they meet them at the hostel, exploit them as they're being lured into being captured and killed in these torturous acts, in which was so unique, so cool. And I think it was very, in that last hour especially, it was very gruesome, very horrific, and it was like a tale of two different films. A sex comedy vibe to then being a horrible, horrific, gruesome film, in which is what makes this pretty good. And this is what makes this movie feel like an absolute classic and a gem of a horror film, as it mixes two different vibes up and gets away with it. And I think that is Tarantino for you. One minute you could be looking at this type of film, oh no, now it's this. Although I do think this movie is predictable at times. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, because I'd rather it be predictable and make sense than an absolute shambles and with no plot line and that you can't really figure out what the fuck's even happening. This was different. This felt like you knew what was going on, but you still wanted to see how it played out, which was with the girls and with the women who were coming onto the men. You knew that they were trying to lure them into something, as they came on way too quick to these guys without knowing them, as it was like, oh yeah, we're going to the spa, are you coming with? And then that was it. Then they shot off like a gun and started going out with each other and hanging out with each other, which just seemed so untrustable and so unrealistic at the same time, that there was always going to be one outcome, in which was them getting lured to some killer men, in which I think was quite different and something that we haven't really seen before. But it was very, very good the way that they did it through their looks, how they were talking to them, and were sort of on them with strings all the time. And when you thought maybe it's somebody else, nope, the women were always involved in the last time these people were seen alive. And I think you knew from minute one you could not trust those two characters in particular. And same with maybe even the receptionist, who looked a bit dodgy. Moving on to the main character, which is Paxton. I thought Paxton wasn't the one I expected to be the main character. It's not a very clear one who is the main character. Well, it weren't to me anyways. I thought that Paxton was more of somebody that was probably going to get killed off, maybe the first or second person to be killed off, just of his personality. Normally you see somebody who's a bit medium get that sort of thing. He felt a bit over the top, like, yeah, come on girls, let's have it. And I thought maybe that Josh might have been the one who was the main character, who would be the standalone left at the end of the movie. However, it was Paxton, in which shocked me quite a bit, because I thought Josh would be the one, even though Josh actually got killed off the second one after Ollie. I think he was not the one I expected to be last, but he escaped. And I think the way in which he escaped, the plan that he had to just put out there last minute, and the fact that he nearly died, apart from the fact that the main guy tripped over his puke and then sawed himself with a chainsaw, and then when the big buff guy comes in, he shoots him. It's like everything just falls for him at the right time. Then he tries to save Kana, in which he's looking revolted at the time because she's had half her face burnt out and her eyes popping out of her head, in which he has to snip it, and it's pretty gross and everything like that. But that's what makes this movie how gruesome and how horrific this last hour is. However, he managed to save her, but then she ends up jumping in front of a train once she sees what she looks like. But when he escapes, I think it was brilliant how he bumps into the guy, one of the guys that lured him there in the first place, in which was sort of this Dutch businessman who seemed a bit off when they were talking to him, as he was sort of like, yeah, this place is meant to be great, it's got loads of girls, you'll probably get laid and stuff like that, telling them all lies basically, because he's one of these killers. Obviously they didn't know that at the time, but he's one of those killers, and he's luring him there so he can obviously get one of them and kill them. And I think he seemed a bit weird, but I love how he bumps into him again at the train, as he knows that he killed Josh, and when he hears the same sort of spiel that he was giving when he was giving them on the train, he listens to it again further down the train and realizes, I've heard that voice before, and then follows him and then kills him on like a revenge for killing Josh and for trying to lure other people to that place where they murdered everybody, and to that hostel. I think that was quite cool how he got his own back in a different type of way, and I think he's only going to get himself into more trouble by doing that in the next movie, but we'll see how he fits in later down the line in the Hostel movies. Further on this point, I felt that it was quite cool how the girls and the businessman use the same tactic every time to help lure these people in. And we see this firsthand with the girls, as soon as they meet the girls in this apartment, find out that they're going to be roomies in this same room together, and they're going to be living in the same quarters. They're like, we're going to a spa, you coming? And then they obviously go with. However, when he gets moved to a different apartment after being booked out because he was meant to be killed, and he ends up moving to a different room. He goes there, and these two other girls say the exact same spiel, and that's why he realizes this is a trap now, and that he fell into the trap previously, and he obviously weren't going to do it again. And then we see, obviously, like I previously mentioned, with the Dutch businessman who was sort of going, and the part that he recognised was where he's talking about with his hands, and he uses his hands to eat his salad, and he's saying that people don't use these hands enough, and then touches the guy next to him, which was Josh at the time, and he could hear that same speech on the train further down, and he's like, I must do something bad, and that's when he kills him, in which was weird how they managed to lure people in that way, but it shows that they're very experienced, and they've done this plenty of times already, of luring people into bringing them to this slaughterhouse. Finally, and I thought that the actors and actresses were incredible, and maybe not the biggest names you'll ever hear, as we saw the likes of Hernandez, Richardson, Eythor Gunjunsson, Barbera Jan Vlasak, Jana Kaberabkova, Jennifer Lim, Patrick Zigo Milda Jedi Havlas. So to summarise this particular movie then, I thought it was great. I think it was an absolute gem of a horror movie, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, but do be aware that this is very, very gruesome, especially in that last hour. So yeah, I thought that this was a classic, hence why I rate this movie an 8.1. Classic film. Let me know down in the comments down below what your thoughts are. Is it great? Is it bad? Is it amazing? Is it terrible? Let me know down in the comments down below, please. Also, we have noticed not enough people have been smashing that subscribe button, so please do that now. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell. See you guys in the next one.